Aarohi Mehta appeared to be the perfect bride, calm, elegant, and smiling. But beneath her composed exterior, a storm was quietly brewing. Kunal Rathore, the charming groom, and his controlling mother, Sunita Rathore, believed they had planned the perfect deception, but they had no idea who they had just married. In the next 3 days, every lie they had built their lives on would begin to unravel in ways they could never imagine. Secrets, betrayals, and hidden truths would surface, and Aarohi's calculated revenge would strike where it hurts the most. Each twist is more shocking than the last, every revelation more deadly, leaving you questioning who is truly in control. Can Kunal and Sunita survive the consequences of their deceit, or will Aarohi's patience and precision destroy everything they hold dear? Watch closely, because by the end, nothing will ever be the same, and every second counts. The wedding looked like something taken straight out of a dream. Soft golden lights filled the hall, flower petals covered the floor, and every guest believed they were witnessing the beginning of a perfect life. Aarohi Mehta stood at the center of it all, dressed in deep red, her face calm and composed. She had grown up in the United States, holding tightly to her family's traditions, believing marriage was a sacred bond built on trust. That belief had guided every decision she made, including agreeing to marry Kunal Rathore. Kunal appeared confident and successful, a man admired by his community. His career, his manners, and his carefully polished image convinced everyone that he was the ideal groom. Standing beside him was his mother, Sunita Rathore, a woman known for her strict values and sharp control over her household. She watched everything closely, ensuring the ceremony followed tradition perfectly. To outsiders, the Rathore family looked powerful, respectable, and united. Aarohi noticed things others didn't. Small details that felt misplaced. The way Kunal smiled more for the cameras than for her. The way his phone never left his hand, even during sacred rituals. The way Sunita's eyes followed Aarohi, not with warmth, but with calculation. These details were easy to ignore in the noise of celebration, yet they settled quietly in Aarohi's mind. The wedding ended with applause, laughter, and endless photographs. Social media filled with messages calling them the perfect couple. Friends admired Aarohi's luck. Relatives praised her grace. No one realized that the happiness on her face was carefully controlled, as if she were observing the event rather than living it. That night, inside the Rathore house, the atmosphere changed. The decorations remained beautiful, but the warmth disappeared. Aarohi felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. The house did not feel new or inviting. It felt guarded. Sunita's presence dominated every corner, reminding Aarohi that this was not her space, not her rules, and not her life to control. As the night grew quieter, Aarohi's unease deepened. Kunal seemed distant, distracted by his phone, constantly stepping away. His attention was never fully present. Each moment confirmed a feeling Aarohi could no longer dismiss. Something was wrong, and it had been wrong long before the wedding. She walked through the house slowly, absorbing her surroundings. Family photos lined the walls, showing a version of Kunal that felt unfamiliar. Smiles looked rehearsed. Celebrations looked staged. It felt less like a home and more like a carefully maintained image. When Aarohi finally found herself alone, the silence became unbearable. The weight of expectations pressed down on her. She had entered this marriage believing in honesty, but nothing around her felt honest. Her instincts, sharpened by years of independence, warned her that she had stepped into something dangerous. Late that night, a small discovery changed everything. It was not dramatic or loud. It was simple, accidental, and devastating. What she saw confirmed her worst fears and hinted at truths far darker than she had imagined. This marriage was not built on love. It was built on lies that had been carefully protected. Aarohi did not cry. She did not panic. Instead, a strange calm took over. The girl who had dreamed of a fairy-tale marriage disappeared in that moment. In her place stood a woman who understood she had been chosen for reasons no one had bothered to explain. As dawn approached, Aarohi sat in silence, fully aware that her life had already changed forever. The wedding had been real, the betrayal even more so. What no one in that house understood was that they had underestimated her. They believed she would endure quietly. They believed tradition would keep her silent. They were wrong. This was only the first night. And it was already clear that the next 3 days would destroy everything they thought they controlled. Morning light entered the house softly, but it did nothing to ease the heaviness Aarohi felt. The celebrations were over, yet the tension lingered like a hidden storm. The Rathore household moved as if nothing had changed, but Aarohi sensed that the calm was artificial. Every action felt rehearsed, every smile forced. She realized that the wedding had not been an ending, but a doorway into something carefully concealed. As the hours passed, Aarohi's unease turned into quiet determination. She paid attention to details she had ignored before. Kunal's constant secrecy, his guarded expressions, his complete emotional absence. These were not habits formed overnight. They were signs of a life divided into separate realities. While alone in the room that was now supposed to be his, Aarohi noticed something small that should not have mattered but did. An unfamiliar email notification appeared on a shared device. One glance led to another, and soon fragments of a hidden life began assembling themselves into a disturbing picture. This was not confusion or misunderstanding. It was proof of a long-term betrayal that had existed well before her name was added to the marriage documents. The discovery left her breathless. Kunal had maintained another relationship for years, presenting himself as committed and single to more than one person at the same time. Promises were made. Futures were planned. Lies were repeated with ease. Aarohi realized she was not his first deception, only his most public one. What hurt more than the betrayal itself was what came next. Evidence suggested that Sunita Rathore had known everything. Messages, timelines, and financial records pointed clearly toward her involvement. This marriage was never meant to be equal. Aarohi had been selected because she fit a plan. Educated, independent, financially stable, easy to exploit under the pressure of tradition. The realization was brutal. Aarohi was not just betrayed by her husband. She was strategically trapped by his mother. Instead of reacting emotionally, Aarohi slowed down. She read carefully. She saved copies. She documented everything. Each new piece of information strengthened her resolve. The shock transformed into clarity. She understood that confronting them would only erase evidence. Silence, for now, was her strongest weapon. That afternoon, Aarohi reached out to someone she trusted deeply from her past. Maya Desai had known her since childhood and understood her strength better than anyone. Through careful steps, Aarohi was connected to Dev Malhotra, a private investigator with experience in financial fraud and marital deception. The decision to involve him was not driven by anger. It was driven by survival. Within hours, Dev began uncovering patterns. Kunal's behavior was not impulsive. It was systematic. Multiple accounts, false identities, hidden transactions, everything designed to protect himself while exploiting others. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became that Sunita Rathore played an active role in shielding her son from consequences. By the end of the day, Aarohi understood something terrifying and empowering at the same time. She was dealing with people who believed they were untouchable. People who had done this before and expected to do it again. Yet they had made one mistake. They had underestimated her patience. As night fell, Aarohi sat quietly, replaying every detail of the last 24 hours. The wedding felt like a lifetime ago. She was no longer the woman who had entered the Rathore house with hope. She was now someone watching from the inside, learning the structure before dismantling it. The betrayal no longer shocked her. It focused her. She realized that revenge did not need chaos. It needed precision. And precision required time. 3 days. That was all she needed. By the time the house went silent again, Aarohi had stopped asking why this happened to her. The question no longer mattered. What mattered was what would happen next. The truth was already moving, quietly, carefully, toward people who believed it would never reach them. And when it did, there would be no escape. The first day of revenge began without noise, without confrontation, and without emotion. Aarohi moved through the morning as if nothing had changed, but her mind was already several steps ahead. Every decision she made that day was deliberate. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was left to chance. The people around her saw calm. What they could not see was control. By noon, the first chain reaction had already started. Information that had been carefully hidden for years began reaching places it was never meant to go. Documents were delivered anonymously. Digital files were uploaded from untraceable locations. Timelines that exposed long-running deception quietly landed in the inboxes of people who mattered the most. Kunal's professional world was the first to feel the impact. Appointments disappeared from his calendar without explanation. Long-standing business connections suddenly became distant. Financial holds appeared where there had once been trust. Nothing pointed directly to a reason, but the damage was undeniable. The image he had spent years building started cracking in places he could not reach. Aarohi watched closely, not with satisfaction, but with focus. She noted every reaction, every sudden change in behavior. Panic revealed itself in small ways. Restlessness, confusion, uncertainty. This was the moment she had been preparing for. When people lose control, they make mistakes. Sunita Rathore sensed the shift but misread its source. She believed the situation could still be managed, just as it always had been before. For years, problems had been silenced with pressure and reputation. This time felt no different to her. That assumption would cost her everything. As the afternoon passed, whispers began spreading through the community. Nothing concrete, just questions, concerns, doubts. That was all it took. The Rathore name, once associated with authority and respect, began attracting suspicion instead of admiration. Aarohi remained invisible throughout it all. She answered when spoken to. She followed routines. She never revealed emotion. Her silence became her shield. The people around her assumed she was unaware or too overwhelmed to notice what was happening. That illusion protected her perfectly. Behind the scenes, Dev Malhotra continued his work with precision. Each piece of evidence was released strategically, never all at once. The goal was not shock. It was erosion, slowly removing the foundation until collapse became inevitable. By evening, Kunal's confidence was gone. The certainty he once carried had been replaced by unease. His world no longer responded the way it used to. Systems failed him. People avoided him. The control he believed he had over his life began slipping away, hour by hour. The most powerful part of the first day was not the damage itself, but the confusion. Neither Kunal nor his mother understood who was responsible. They searched for external threats, unaware that the person they had underestimated was standing inside their own house. As night approached, Aarohi reviewed everything one final time. She checked timelines, confirmed receipts, ensured every move had landed exactly where intended. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was emotional. This was not revenge fueled by anger. It was justice executed with clarity. She understood something important as she prepared for what came next. Breaking trust was easy. Rebuilding control was impossible. The first day ended without confrontation, without raised voices, and without visible collapse. Yet the damage was already irreversible. The structure that once protected the Rathore family had been breached. Aarohi lay awake long after the house fell silent, not from fear, but from awareness. The hardest part was over. The illusion had been shattered. From this point forward, every step would only tighten the consequences. And this was only day one. The second day began with tension thick enough to feel in the air. The house was quieter than before, not peaceful, but alert, as if it sensed something moving beneath the surface. Aarohi noticed how routines broke down. Movements became rushed. Glances lingered too long. Control was slipping, and fear was beginning to replace confidence. Sunita Rathore woke that morning with a growing sense of threat she could not name. For years, she had managed problems before they reached daylight. Reputation had always been her strongest weapon. But now, reputation itself was under attack. Messages went unanswered. Familiar names stopped returning calls. The silence around her was louder than confrontation. What Sunita did not realize was that the focus had shifted entirely onto her. The second phase of Aarohi's plan was already in motion. Evidence that had remained buried for decades was now being carefully guided toward the right systems. Financial irregularities surfaced. Old records began to connect in ways they never had before. Patterns formed, clear and undeniable. The image of a strict but honorable woman began transforming into something far more dangerous. Authorities received information that was too precise to ignore. Dates matched. Signatures aligned. Transactions told a story of manipulation hidden behind cultural authority. This was no longer about family matters. It was about legal consequences. Sunita felt the shift before she understood it. Her confidence cracked. The woman who once controlled every outcome now found herself reacting instead of directing. For the first time in years, she was not ahead of the situation. She was trapped inside it. Kunal, meanwhile, spiraled faster. The walls closing in on his professional life now began tightening personally. His attempts to regain control only exposed more weaknesses. Each move revealed another lie. Each correction opened another trail. He had relied on silence and protection for too long, and now both were gone. Aarohi observed everything with unsettling calm. She did not interfere. She did not push. She allowed events to unfold exactly as planned. The power of the second day came from inevitability. Once the truth reached the system, it could not be pulled back. By afternoon, the Rathore name carried weight of a different kind. Not respect. Suspicion. People who once sought approval now kept their distance. Invitations disappeared. Doors closed quietly. Social standing, built over decades, dissolved within hours. The most devastating part was not the investigation itself. It was exposure, the loss of control, the realization that authority no longer worked. Sunita had built her life on the belief that fear and image could override accountability. That belief collapsed completely. Aarohi understood something important as she watched it happen. Power does not disappear loudly. It fades. And when it fades, it leaves nothing behind to hide behind. As evening approached, the pressure reached a breaking point. Kunal and his mother were no longer united. Survival instincts replaced loyalty. Protection turned into blame. The family structure that once appeared unbreakable fractured under stress. Aarohi remained untouched by the chaos. Her silence confused everyone. They still failed to see her as the source. To them, she was background. An observer. A presence too quiet to fear. That misunderstanding was their final mistake. The second day ended with consequences already set in motion, consequences that no apology or explanation could reverse. Investigations did not stop once they began. Records did not erase themselves. Truth, once exposed, refused to disappear. As night fell, Aarohi prepared for the final stage. The hardest truths had surfaced. The strongest defenses had collapsed. What remained was the end. The third day began with an eerie calm. Aarohi moved through the Rathore house as if nothing had changed, but the truth was already rewriting everything around her. The previous 2 days had weakened Kunal and his mother, stripped them of the illusions that had protected them for years. By this morning, the final phase of her plan was ready to unfold, one that would leave no room for denial or escape. Kunal awoke with a growing sense of dread. The trails of exposure had multiplied overnight. Meetings he thought were private were compromised. Accounts he believed secure were flagged. Every step he took now led into traps he could not see. The panic that had been creeping in during the last 24 hours now became a full-blown awareness. He was no longer in control. Every move was being anticipated. Every attempt to regain power failed before it began. Sunita Rathore, once untouchable, spent the morning in quiet disbelief. Investigators were asking questions she could not answer. Connections she had hidden for years were suddenly visible in ways she had never anticipated. The protective shield she had built around her son and herself was now fractured, and no amount of influence or intimidation could repair it. Aarohi's advantage was not in her aggression, but in the preparation she had meticulously built over weeks. She had ensured that legal, financial, and social consequences would strike simultaneously. When authorities began contacting Kunal and Sunita, it was no coincidence. Every detail, every hidden record, had been aligned to confirm the pattern of deception and manipulation. By midday, Kunal's attempts to reclaim normalcy had failed. His messages went unanswered. Attempts to seek legal protection collapsed under scrutiny. Friends and allies who had once trusted him started questioning his credibility. For the first time, the illusion of power surrounding him was gone, replaced by vulnerability he could not escape. Sunita tried to intervene, but every move she made only worsened the situation. Evidence she had thought buried was now undeniable. officials, financial institutions, and community leaders began connecting the dots with precision. The woman who had long controlled outcomes realized she was now at the mercy of forces she could not control. Aarohi's final step was strategic. She revealed a pre-existing legal safeguard, one that she had quietly ensured during the wedding planning. The marriage contract, signed and notarized without Kunal's full awareness, shifted financial responsibility and liability entirely in her favor. Every resource Kunal had counted on to protect himself and maintain his status was now legally inaccessible. The consequences were permanent and irreversible. By late afternoon, the Rathore household was transformed. Panic had replaced arrogance. Confusion had replaced certainty. Alliances dissolved as fear took root. Kunal and Sunita, once appearing untouchable, were now subjects of investigation, scrutiny, and social isolation. The power that had defined them was stripped away quietly, methodically, and completely. Aarohi observed the final collapse with careful composure. She did not gloat. She did not celebrate. Her revenge was not an outburst of anger, but the execution of a carefully planned justice. She had exposed betrayal, protected herself, and dismantled the illusion of invincibility that had dominated the Rathore family for decades. As evening approached, the quiet descended over the house. Kunal and Sunita were left with nothing but the consequences of their actions. No one could save them. No reputation could repair the damage. The world around them had shifted irrevocably. When Aarohi finally left the Rathore household, she carried nothing but her dignity and the certainty that justice, when planned with patience and precision, could be absolute. She had taken 3 days to orchestrate the downfall of those who had underestimated her, and the results were complete. Officer Neil Carter, who later reviewed the case, described it as one of the most methodical, calculated acts of personal justice he had ever witnessed. There was no chaos, no public confrontation, no unnecessary violence. Only consequences, deliberate and unstoppable, delivered quietly by someone who had been patient, observant, and precise. The story of Aarohi Mehta's revenge is a chilling reminder that silence can be more powerful than shouting, patience can be more dangerous than rage, and the quietest person in the room can be the one shaping the end. In 3 days, she had turned betrayal into accountability, lies into truth, and weakness into unstoppable strategy. The Rathore name, once untouchable, was now a warning to anyone who believed they could manipulate others without consequence. And Aarohi? She walked away free, unbroken, and stronger than ever, leaving behind a legacy that no one would forget. The third day would not be about exposure or fear. It would be about permanence.